Hello everyone, my name is Paul, and today I would like to share with you the results of my recent research devoted to telecollaboration. And since I know that we are all coming from different scientific backgrounds, I just wanted to clarify that now we will be diving into applied linguistics and more specifically second language acquisition. So let me start by saying what telecollaboration is. According to Belts, telecollaboration, or simply TC, involves the use of various web tools by geographically distant students and institutionalized context for the purpose of developing their foreign language and intercultural skills. Similarly, Goof and Helm state that telecollaboration is an institutionalized and internet-based exchange between students from different scientific backgrounds whose aim is to develop linguistics and cultural skills through structured tasks. Telecollaboration can be divided into two main modes, so synchronous and asynchronous, and each of them can be also either oral or written. And TCs using both synchronous and asynchronous modes are also quite common. Synchronous TCs can take the form of, for instance, video conferences, chats, and virtual words, while asynchronous TCs are usually mediated by blogs, emails, and discussion forums. At this point, I need to highlight the overall growth of studies devoted to C over the years, here between 1995 and 2022, and searching only by the term telecollaboration in the Scopus database. Particularly in recent years, we can observe an exponential growth of studies devoted to TC, as you can see between 2018 and 2022, there were between 200 and 400 new articles on this topic per year. What is more, a significant number of papers devoted to this were published during and after the COVID-19 pandemic, so from 2020 onwards, when pretty much all of the branches of education had to switch to emergency remote teaching, which in turn led to an increased interest in telecollaboration. And having discovered this substantial rise of publications on TC, I moved on to the idea of preparing a synthesis of the recently published primary studies on TC that will be beneficial for the field as well as all the new practitioners and researchers exploring TC. To do this, I first searched for the already published secondary literature in the field of TC to find out what has already been discovered and what was not, in particular, which timeframes have already been covered. Then I was also interested in the methodology of the past studies and, of course, the findings of these studies. Moreover, I wanted to connect the results of my research to the already existing secondary literature on TC. Hence, I needed to create a sort of point of reference for my study. And here you can see a visual summary of all the reviews of TC that were available to me at the start of my investigation. And at that time, there were 13 such studies. Among them, I identified the 4 core studies, which had the most comprehensive scopes in comparison to the remaining publications. And so here you can see those 4 core studies along with their timeframes, and they're superimposed on the overall number of studies on TC per year, which we have already seen before. And you should be able to immediately spot something very important, namely that there is a vast number of studies that have not yet been analyzed by the means of secondary research, so the studies published from 2016 onwards. And so in my review, marked in red, I included these studies published between 2016 and 2021, both inclusive, and I chose the start year of the scope of my study, so 2016, precisely because of this finding, while the end year was simply the last full year I could take into consideration given the time of writing. And even if I go back to the original 13 studies, you can see that the state of affairs is pretty much similar. Interestingly, my calculations also showed that the number of studies on TC published within the 20-year time span, which is marked in green, so essentially the 21st years of telecollaboration, is nearly equal to the number of studies on TC published in just 6 following years, marked here in red, which signifies the contemporary growth of TC and thus the magnitude of the phenomenon that my study attempts to analyze and synthesize. Now let me show you how I tackled this research problem. So this is the Prisma 2024 diagram for systematic reviews, and since it's quite big, I'm going to present it step by step, so please avoid. In the first stage of the systematic review called identification, I selected the databases in which I conducted my search for the relevant research articles. I chose Scopus and Web of Science since they are commonly considered to be the largest and leading multidisciplinary academic databases, as well as providing good quality metadata. But how exactly did I conduct the search? Well, in total, I used 12 of these keywords, which can be considered as synonyms of TC in the literature. And as you can imagine, a search with this many keywords can yield hundreds of potential studies. Well, and in fact, it did, providing me with 229 studies in the case of Scopus and 380 in the case of Web of Science. All of these extracted studies were peer-reviewed, which was also ensured by the selected databases. Additionally, all of them were journal articles, which is a commonly considered strategy due to the inaccessibility of book chapters, or since other sources are neither easily retrievable nor peer-reviewed. My aim was also to ensure the replicability of my research, which would be much more difficult to do if I chose sources other than just journal articles. Uh, as a result of merging the records obtained from these two databases, around 160 studies in total were recognized as duplicates and therefore removed from the corpus, and this phase of the review was conducted in the, I assume, well-known reference manager, Mendeley. Next, I entered the second stage of the process, namely the screening phase, during which I reviewed the titles, abstracts, and keywords of the remaining 443 studies, and here I had to apply certain criteria to further narrow down the search. In total, there were 12 inclusion criteria that the studies had to fulfill in order to be included in the final corpus of studies. Particularly notable is that the studies had to be written in English, be of empirical nature, and must have included some kind of raw data, such as participants' responses. And so, after excluding a couple hundred of studies that did not fulfill all of these criteria, I was left with 124 studies. Unfortunately, out of them, I could not obtain the full text of 9 studies, which, as a result, had to be excluded. Consequently, I was left with 115 research articles, and then I also divided them into 3 categories, namely tandem exchanges, so TCs between native speakers that aim to learn and practice each other's languages, English as a lingua franca TCs, where English is the main language of the exchange between non-native speakers of English, and exchanges in English, but including some native speakers and therefore not being the pure lingua franca exchanges. Among all of them, I was only interested in English as a lingua franca thesis. And so I was left with 38 research articles. Well, the database search actually gave me 36 of them, but 2 of them came from the rightmost part of the diagram, if you recall that, precisely from a search enhancement technique called snowballing, meaning that these 2 studies were found among the references of the already included 36 studies. And so, in total, 38 studies from the corpus which I analyzed. But yes, in order to actually analyze it, I divided the extracted data into qualitative and quantitative, and today I will only focus on the former. To begin with, the research articles under scrutiny of my study were published in 24 different journals. 19 studies in total appeared in journals that featured 2 or more research articles, such as COL, LLET, COL-EJ, International Journal of COL and Teaching, as well as System, while each of the remaining 19 research articles were published in a different journal, distinct from the ones listed above and from each other. Interestingly, the number of studies appearing in top COL journals was equal to the number of articles published in other, perhaps less known journals. What is more, in the 6 years under scrutiny of my study, there were between 5 and 8 research articles published on the topic of FTCs per year, with the average yearly number within this time frame being around 7 articles per year. Now, to provide you with an image of a typical FTC project, I will show you the characteristics of such exchanges that stem from my research, and you can always find the number of studies that reported on the given aspect of an FTC project in the title of the given slide. So, first of all, FTC projects tend to last between 4 and 16 weeks, with the average duration being 10 weeks. Half of the analyzed TCs lasted between 4 and 8 weeks, while the other half between 8 and 16 weeks. Nevertheless, the majority, so around 60% of FTCs lasted between 4 and 10 weeks. Second, FTCs are mostly compulsory for their participants, with only about 10% of such projects being an optional activity for students, and even less often being offered in a mixed form. Third, FTCs are mostly conducted both synchronously and asynchronously, with only synchronous and only asynchronous modes being comparably used, although less often. If we add the number of mixed TCs, so the first one here, to the number of only synchronous and asynchronous TCs, the difference in their aggregated use is pretty much negligible, although slightly in favor of synchronous TCs. Fourth, TC tools. So the total number of TC tools used in the studies under scrutiny of my study was 90. The most commonly used tools included Facebook, Skype, email, Moodle, and Padlet, as well as WhatsApp. But yeah, these results get much more interesting when cumulative sums are considered. And so among the top cumulative sums are video conferencing tools, social media, learning management systems, instant messaging apps, and various presentation creators. Also, a typical FTC project includes between 1 and 6 tools, with the average of 3 TC tools being used concurrently in the given exchange. Moreover, the majority of FTCs involves the use of 2 or more tools, but exchanges that use only one tool were also quite, although less popular. Moving on to the fifth aspect, FTC projects I analyzed included between 11 and 76 participants, with the average number being around 42 learners. Six, the actual collaboration between groups of participants most often takes place in groups, rather distantly followed by pair work and mixed cooperation settings. Seventh, FTC projects tend to include between 1 and 13 sessions, and on average, usually around 7 of them. What is more, in nearly 80% of cases, this session took place weekly, being distantly followed by more than weekly and less than weekly telecollaborations. The duration of such collaborations varied greatly from project to project and ranged between 25 and 135 minutes in the case of each session. The average FTC session, however, lasted for around an hour. And here also, interestingly, the top cases included 90 minutes, 30 minutes, and 50 minutes, which can be pretty much explained by the typical duration of classes or a part of a class in various educational settings worldwide. 8. So FTC projects are characterized by a variety of topics discussed. However, I found certain recurring topics here, namely the cultural topics, the most common of all, and rather distantly followed by education and ecology, with numerous other topics being discussed as well. As far as the characteristics of participants of FTC projects are concerned, the results of my study suggest that the participants of FTC projects are mostly female, with males constituting about a third of all participants. And in total, there were 89 groups of participants in my corpus of studies, which came from 37 distinct countries and 8 world regions located on 6 continents. The top countries of residence of FTC participants included Japan, Spain, Taiwan, Germany, and Poland. While in terms of the regions, FTC participants came mostly from Europe, Asia, followed by the Middle East, and also rather recently South America. FTC projects included between 2 and 7 countries, with average being 3. However, the vast majority of exchanges were bilateral, and only around 20% of them were multilateral. Notably, among the bilateral TCs, I found some pairs of countries that frequently collaborated with each other, namely Japan and Taiwan, Germany and Poland, as well as Poland and Spain. Moreover, in my corpus, I identified 20 intra-regional exchanges, so within one region, and 16 inter-regional exchanges, so between different regions. And coming back to the participants, their age varied quite significantly across all studies, namely between 6 and 56. However, the average age of FTC participants was around 25. The differences in age groups were also quite significant, with learners in their 20s clearly dominating here. This trend is actually also reflected among educational stages, and here the tertiary level clearly surpasses other levels, i.e. secondary and primary and mixed age learning contexts, each of which is clearly under research. And notably, among the tertiary level FTC participants, there was also a significant number of pre-service teachers and students majoring in English. And lastly, As far as the proficiency in English of the FTC participants is concerned, it ranged all the way from elementary to advanced. However, the most common English levels were intermediate and intermediate advanced, which were rather distantly followed by elementary and advanced levels of English. And yes, that will be all from me for now. Thank you very much. Certainly, much more can be said about the subject matter, and I've got many more interesting results. But I hope you've grasped like an image of a typical contemporary LTC project and its characteristics from this talk. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'd be, of course, more than happy to answer them to the best of my ability. And while I'm thinking about the questions, I'm also going to show you my references that I've used in the presentation and also the references of the synthesized studies. I'll be also happy to send you the slides if you're interested. Thank you very much. And I yield the floor back to the chair.